or progressivism. More specifically, progressivism. What is that? We use the term all the time. What is that?
Marxism.
What is Marxism, Alan?
It's collectivism, lack of human rights, non-belief in God, the set of communist principles that Marx put out in the 1800s.
And it begins with the idea that men are not free?
Yes. The state is superior to the individual.
Yes. Watch this. Woodrow Wilson. Yuck, he says. This is profound. Woodrow Wilson in 1911 says this: if you want to understand the Declaration of Independence, don't read the preface. This is, at the time, one of the most powerful men in the world. And he says, if you want to understand the Declaration of Independence, don't read the preface. Why would he say that? What is the preface? Well, we just talked about it. All men are born free, government is to secure liberties, and number 3, all power begins with the people. Why would he say something like that? This is a classic page from the playbook of progressivism. So when Barack Obama gets up and says, you didn't build that, it's a classic page from the playbook of progressivism. Going all the way back, not just to Woodrow Wilson, even before this, but really we see this idea start to materialize and have teeth. What is left if you ignore the preface? What is left in the Declaration of Independence? Any idea?
Complaints against the king.
Exactly, the complaints against the king. So he's saying, that's what you need to be reading. I don't care about the preface. These are just philosophy of a bunch of old, dead, white men. Who cares? The most important component of the Declaration is the 27 grievances against the king. Why would he make that argument? He's saying they had problems back in the 1770s, just like we've got problems in the 1900s. We're just as free as they were. They decided to address their problems in a certain way. We will address our problems in a certain way. Well, how? Well, I'm not bound to honor the idea that all men are born free. I don't have to do that. You go on to FDR, and what does he say? He continues on, he says, you may make the argument that men are born free, but you and I know that they are not. It's an extension from Woodrow Wilson. You and I may say that men are born free, but deep down, you know they're not. What's he arguing? He's arguing the same thing that this current administration is arguing, just in different words. Well, how so? Think about this. You're going to leave this PrepperFest at some point today. And you're going to pull out to this street and you're going to make some decisions. You're going to make a decision to go left, left again, right, and then right again. You're going to make a decision. Well, us sitting in here believing that all men are free, why are you making those decisions? For just that reason, because you're free. You can make the choices that you wish to make, and you're accountable for your own choices. But what does progressivism say? Progressivism says, the reason why you pulled out of this, metaphorically, the reason why you pulled out of this parking lot and went left, left, right, and right is because you are not truly free. You are enslaved to a certain degree. You don't have a house. You don't have enough food on the table. You don't have health care. You don't have water. You don't have those things. And the only way those things can be provided to you is if government provides them to you. This is straight from Woodrow, straight from FDR, and being played out today. The only way human beings can be free is if government provides it for them. It provides a way for you to be free. This is what we're fighting against. This is absolutely what we're fighting against. And now that you understand the argument, at least the foundation of the argument that you're fighting against, your argument should be framed much differently than perhaps they have in the past. Because you understand really their underlying philosophy. We have to go on the offensive. We have to stop playing defense and defending the idea that men are born free. We have to stop just defending the idea that government is to secure the right. Let's make them justify, again, why their ideas are better. Have you noticed what happens, and I know Alan can attest to this, and there's other people in this room that can attest to this. When you start mandating that other people justify why their ideas are better, what happens 90% of the time? There's no debate. They run. They don't want to talk about it. I can give you an example. We talked about this a little bit last night. Michael Seidman, Professor Michael Seidman from the Georgetown Law School. He did an editorial with CBS in January, and he said, the Constitution is outdated. It does not allow us to deal with the issues of our time. The solution is to get rid of it and let's have rational, decent debate. That's his solution. That's how we solve the problems in our country. We've got too many obstacles that government has to climb over in order to get anything done in this country. It's too difficult. So he says, let's just bring people together and let them debate. And when they come up with good solutions, let's move forward with those solutions. I flew out to Washington, D.C. 6 weeks ago. And I pounded on Michael Seidman's door. And I sat down in his office. And I said, Professor Seidman, are you willing to defend your ideas on a national stage? Are you willing to debate these issues on a national stage? We had reached out to CBS, C-SPAN, and some other national networks that had indicated a willingness to televise this debate, given that he'd been given a lot of time on CBS. He says, well, let me get back to you. What do you think happened? We got word back. We did get word back a couple weeks ago. And the answer was not interested. Not interested. That's what I'm talking about. They claim that they want to debate the issues. He's the one who said, I am anxious and I'm excited to debate these ideas with people that disagree. Apparently no one else knocked on his door. I knocked on his door and said, let's go. His excuse while we were in the office was, well, I really don't do the trial lawyer type of debate. Just let's have the intellectual. I said, we can do anything you want. Let's just debate the idea of whether or not the Constitution is relevant today. And whether or not the solution is to get rid of it. Let's talk about it. Because here's one of his primary arguments, a couple of things. Number one, he says, the Constitution is too difficult to change. Well, that's kind of the idea. That's kind of the idea. But he also says that why should people who lived 250 years ago be able to tell us how to govern? He's overlooking timeless principles that are true. Separation of power, division of authority, enumeration of rights, parameters of authority, that is, enumerating specifically what government can and cannot do, popular sovereignty, Republican form of government, foundation based on a creed, that all men are born free. Those are timeless principles. But let's talk about the argument for just a moment. What argument would you make that it's just a bunch of old dead white men? Well, that's one of the arguments you make. But let me ask you this question. If Hitler and Mussolini and Mao were to walk into this room, risen from the dead, they were to stand up here, and they were to look you in the eye and say, killing is wrong.
We'd shoot them all.
You shoot them all. I want to step back for just a moment. So here's Stalin, Mao, and Hitler standing up here. Picture that for just a moment. And then go back to his argument, because his argument is not only are they telling us what to do, and our times are different, but they were hypocrites. They were slave owners. That's their argument. So we go back to Mao, Stalin, and Hitler. And they were to stand up and say, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you something. Killing is bad. Killing is morally wrong. Well, you might kill them, but would you disbelieve them? You would not disbelieve them. They are speaking the truth. Killing is wrong. It is morally reprehensible. Here's my point. The truthfulness of a statement does not depend on the virtue of the person making it. It doesn't matter if you have individuals standing up who are hypocrites. If they speak the truth, you might challenge their credibility, but you would not say that their statements are untrue. It's the same thing with our founding fathers. They did things, some of them did things. I mean, we're being fed this argument that the Constitution was written by a bunch of slave owners. Do you know how many people signed off on the Declaration of Independence? 56. How many of them were slave owners? Less than 15. How many people signed the Constitution? 39. How many of them were slave owners? Less than 15. So we've taken what the minority have done and we've tried to taint the truths that are really embraced in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
If they're calling our founders, if they're, you know, if they're how many years old and they're dead and they're just bad white men, why should we listen to them anymore? And why are they listening to Mao Zedong? Why are they listening to Hitler? Why are they still following those guys' rules as if it's today and they believe in these guys? So what's the difference? It's the same thing.
Of course, they wouldn't come out and say that I believe in the philosophy of Hitler, right? They wouldn't do that. But what's important is that we understand the philosophy that we're dealing with, and that's really the point that I'm making. Because, Francine, you bring up a great point. I want to believe that I am the voice of reason and that we are the voice of reason. If we are the voice of reason, how we articulate the message is incredibly important. It is so important, ladies and gentlemen. The name calling, we have to be very careful about how we're addressing other individuals. And let me just explain this for a moment, now I'm going to come to you. There are some individuals that you can call names and, okay, so what? But let's look at the demographic in America right now. According to exit polls, about 40% of all Americans are avowed conservatives. They believe in freedom. 20% of all Americans are avowed liberals. What does that leave the other 40%? The other 40% are uninformed and misinformed, or both. Or either or. So you must recognize that when you have an opportunity to debate an issue, you better look at your surroundings. If I am dealing with someone who is a hardcore liberal, I will debate that individual different than I am if I were debating some of my own people or someone who's uninformed or misinformed. There's different tactics that are involved. See, if I'm debating somebody who is a hardcore liberal, am I interested in convincing him? No, I'm never going to convince him. Who am I trying to convince when I engage this individual in a debate? The people that are listening. The people that are listening. And if I come across as the old, angry white guy who wants to yell and scream and call names, those uninformed or misinformed are not so inclined to listen to my message. I've still got to expose him, but I've got to be the voice of reason. This is so important. This is a fundamental tactic that we must embrace. There was a lady that stood up and said, you know, Mr. Krauser, you're saying you're getting into schools, but we can't get into schools. And I said, well, why not? They said, those darn liberal progressives won't allow us. They're preaching all this false doctrine inside the schools. I said, listen to yourself talk. That's why you're not getting into the schools. Do you think knocking on the door of a liberal progressive who's on the school board, or as the principal, or as a part of the administration, going in and using that sort of terminology, they're going to be just so happy that you're here and they're going to let you into the schools? Of course not. It's because we don't bring credibility to the table. We're not wise and judicious in the way that we talk and the way that we communicate our message. See, I like to think that when I stand up in front of a group of kids, or even in front of a group like this, that you sit back, whether you're conservative or liberal, and say, that makes sense. It just feels right. I'm guessing that 99% of you, as we've been talking, says, of course that's the way it is. And when you take this message to the culture, and you start to articulate the message this way, what's the culture going to do? I've been sold a bill of goods. Of course this makes sense. It's like reading John Locke for the first time. And he talks about men are born free, and government has certain obligations, but they are limited. You sit back and you say, of course that's the way it is. Right? That's who we have to be. And if we're going to take this country back, and we're going to take the culture back, we have to be the voice of reason. But of course, we have to understand our message first and foremost.